Let's take a bite out of the Apple Cup.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. We write for Inside the Huskies with Fan Nation Sports Illustrated. You can check out all our written work over there at si.com/college/Washington. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. And as Lars said in the opener, we were getting ready to prep the show, and then all of a sudden, this news from KJR comes out that the Apple Cup will be continuing next year at Lumen Field. So, Lars, as a Washington State alum, off the top, I just want your immediate reaction.
Yeah, I mean, I think what it sounds like is it's not necessarily a one-off, but it's kind of like a 1-year happy resolution, and then
like
they will figure
stopgap.
A stopgap, perfect word to use that is where it's like. Because the game would have been in Pullman next season, no matter what, just based on the fact that Washington's hosting Washington State this season, the game had to be in Pullman next year. You can't have back-to-back in Seattle. The only way to do that is to make it a quote-unquote neutral site game, in which I would likely, surmise that Washington State will get some concessions financially. That it's reportedly that Washington State will split the gate from the game, and then I'm assuming Washington State will have extra concessions to allow for the travel across the state and things like that to get at least some of the a decent amount of students from Pullman over to Seattle for the game. Because again, the one thing that I wasn't necessarily totally against a neutral site at Lumen, but it's hard to call Lumen a neutral site when you can take a 10-minute light rail from the campus down to downtown Seattle and you got to drive 4.5 hours across the state. The caveat to that is you do have a lot of Washington State alumni on the west side of the state. So yes, you can draw more fans generally to the game, but I think to be fair all around for both, because you want the student section at both games, right? And no matter when,
yeah.
If the game the game likely will be in September, whether it's the first week or the final week, one way or another, I think you're going to want to have students there. The ironic part is UW doesn't start until mid to late September, so the students might necessarily not be there for that game, whereas Wazoo would be in session already, and those students will already show up. So how do you get Wazoo students over? How does UW entice their students to come to the game? I think all those logistics will be worked out, and it's a happy resolution because let's be real. I think it's good for the Apple Cup to continue. And honestly, if you're from a Washington State perspective, it's a marquee game, right? So if you're able to get ESPN or Fox to televise the game, that's added eyeballs for you. And, again, if you win the game, it's even more reason to play the game, right? And if you don't win the game, okay, well, you get a decent non-conference check. So would you rather do that, or would you rather play Montana State, Idaho, and Fresno State maybe not Fresno State, but another
That's going to be a conference game soon.
I was about to say. So, however all that works out. But the point of what I'm getting at is you want to have at least one marquee non-conference game, no matter who you are. And if you're UW, solves a non-conference game for you. It's like, hey, it's still Washington State. It's still a Power 5 school overall, no matter what you say. No matter if they go to the Mountain West or not, it's still a Power 5 program. It will always be that way. So I think it's a happy resolution. It's a win-win for the time being. The curious thing would be, does it go back to the home and home in 25, 26 and moving forward, which I think it should. And I think there's a way in which they can make that work. But I think next year, this is kind of a good test to see, okay, how does a game in not in late November look? I think that's kind of what they're aiming at.
So I want to give a shout out to Ian Furness, who did break the news on KJR, and just he tweeted a little bit of a follow-up, just saying not a done deal, but heading that way. Money for Wazoo, compromise for UW in the game because it would have been in Pullman next year if the conference didn't implode. So that's something extra to consider here. One extra little bit of just kind of pushback I've heard, and it's something we discussed beforehand when we were prepping for this, is Washington season ticket holders would want some kind of guarantee, especially for this game at Lumen, that they would be able to get in, right? And I'm sure that's going to be a big thing for Washington State season ticket holders as well. Even though it might be a little bit tougher for some of them to come over for the game, But there's got to be a way to make that work. And I think that it is a good thing for Wazoo in the short term because there is going to be a little bit more money on top of that, right? Because it's a bigger setting. And there's more opportunities for money to be made there. And just on the other side of it for Washington, not only does it solve the non-conference, but it kind of keeps the tradition and the history of this rivalry alive. And then something that Troy Dana talked about in his opening press conference when he was introduced at the athletic director a couple weeks ago is he said, we want to play 7 home games. And Lars, you're right. While it's technically going to be a home game for Washington State, there's no way that Washington doesn't make a decent pool of cash off of a game at Lumen Field. So I think that it's going to work out for both parties in the end. And then, we'll see if it goes back to a home and home after this. We haven't necessarily gotten to that point yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if it does, or even like the Lumen Field tradition, like that's a way to keep it going. Cause we were talking about before the show where that could be a week 1 kind of thing, right? Where you kick off the season that way. It's a fun way to not only kick off the college football season, but instead of, and no offense to a Tulsa or a Portland State of the world, it's going to draw more eyeballs and it's going to get more fans to come to the stadium. If it's a Washington State to kick off the year. And then, going forward with those non-conference games early on, there's going to be a little bit more energy around the program, I would say, from a Washington perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, as I told you in the pre-show, with the world of NIL and things like that, there's plenty of ways in which Washington State and the Cougar Collective could partner with Greyhound and say, hey, you know what? Let's have Cam Ward or insert whoever Wazoo player do an ad for Greyhound, have a few buses that come over for the game, and boom, it's a win-win. So there's so many ways to market this. There's so many ways to make it a net positive. There's no way you don't do this, at least for 1 year. Right? Having covered the game, I don't know, I think it was 2013, I believe, against Rutgers, between Washington State and Rutgers at CenturyLink, the location formerly known as CenturyLink, now Lumen Field. There was not a ton of crowd. There was not a ton of fans in the crowd in the stands. That said, with Washington, with the local tie, I think all of that narrative goes away. I think you'll get plenty of Wazoo fans that will want to at least come out for that one. Just there's no reason not to. I think as long as you make the ticket prices reasonable to where you're not pricing out certain parts of the fan base and certain parts of each institution's fan base, and just make it kind of a fair setup, which I have no doubt Troy Dan and Pat Chung will get along on that respect and make it work. So there's plenty of ways in which this will work out for both programs. And yeah, again, as we've said, this is certainly a better opponent that either school would have had outside of a kickoff classic against, an SEC school, which again, at that point, it's almost like the reverse with UW Auburn, where UW travels down to Atlanta to play a quote unquote neutral site against Auburn.
Right.
It's kind of the reverse of that, where it's like, yeah, it's not necessarily a neutral site, but at least it's in the same state. It's a rivalry history game. It's not just like, hey, we're going to play Washington Cal in the kickoff game at Levi Stadium. It's like, okay, nobody's going to care about that as much as Washington State. That one will certainly draw eyeballs.
No, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more there. And I feel like that's a great place to just kind of wrap this one up, because we are going to end up talking about, could USC be Washington's toughest challenge? I've got a take that I want to throw at you live. And it doesn't involve Alex Grinch. It doesn't. I'll just say that much. But you'll have to stay tuned after the break for that, because first, we're going to talk about our friends over at FanDuel, and you can score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel is an official partner of the NFL. Lars, is the over-under for this game still at 75.5? I thought I saw something that might have moved.
No, I'm looking at FanDuel right now, 3.5, 75.5. I'm also looking at some of these same game parlays, my friend.
Ooh, you want to throw one out here for us real fast?
Man, none of them are all. I mean, there's so many UW minus single anytime touchdown scores. Oh. It's like going through this list. We'll do this a little bit later, but the one that give me plus money on Devin Cole, Jeremy Bernard is plus 165. Michael Penix anytime touchdown is plus 340. God, that would be beautiful. plus 420 Washington defense, plus 480 USC defense anytime touchdown. So FanDuel even agrees that Washington has the better defense. So it's a saving grace there.
I like that a lot. So I want to throw this take at you. And I believe that USC could be the toughest. I like this thinker pose here. I believe that USC could be the toughest challenge that Washington faces this month because of Caleb Williams in the offense. I don't think that's a hot take, but I want to throw this take at you because it's something that you talked about in the preseason, that you see that this could be the one loss on the schedule. And since we both had them going 11-1. And I think that Washington's defense is vulnerable against this USC offense. And it's not like that they're not going to score on Alex Grinch, but I think that Caleb Williams and the rest of the USC offense makes this the toughest challenge this month, because we know about Utah's defense, right? But Oregon cut through that defense like Swiss cheese. And especially with what that offense looks like in Utah, I don't know how I feel about that, and especially with the way the Washington defense can play. I think that they might be up for that challenge. And it's kind of the same thing with Oregon State, right? Where we talked a lot about just this November schedule on yesterday's show. Oregon State has a really good defense, and they can run the ball really well. So that's going to be a really tough challenge too. But if DJ Uiagalelei is not at the top of his game, I was on with Spencer McLaughlin, our good friend of the show, on the Tuesday episode of Locked On Pac-12, and we talked a lot about it. We power ranked all the quarterbacks in the conference. And you should listen to where he had Michael Penix, and give him an earful on his YouTube channel. But one thing that we talked about with DJ is if he's not at the top of his game, it's not necessarily pretty for that team. And if Washington is able to get some pressure on him, and maybe he just makes a couple of bad throws anyways, because he does that kind of routinely, that it just kind of just negates a lot of what makes Oregon State so tough. Because if the defense is on the field for a long period of time, that's not easy for any defense to contend with. And then Washington State, yeah, it's tough, and Cam Ward is really tough to defend in his own right, but they just lost to Arizona State, and they just have not looked great over the last couple of weeks. So there's the take. USC could be the toughest challenge this month. Your thoughts?
Cam Ward did put up more points on Arizona State than Michael Penix. Just saying that. Now, with that being said,
that's true.
Just wanted to get that out there. But no, but you're absolutely right. But I think so. As I've been thinking about it more, I was also on a USC show last night. It's not about Caleb Williams, as crazy as that sounds. Caleb's going to cook regardless. Okay, Caleb is Caleb, right? Undoubt, once in a generation, no doubt, all that stuff. Where does Washington struggle this season? Stopping the run. Stopping interior pressure. What does USC have? No pun intended with the victory sign there. That they put that down really quick. That Washington is going to be facing Marshawn Lloyd at running back and Bear Alexander up the middle. Bear Alexander has not been, and I said this last night, he has not been what people thought he was going to be. I think that's a fair assessment. Not that he's terrible, not that he's overrated, but he certainly has not been the game.
He hasn't lived up to the hype.
Exactly. And now part of that could be scheme, coaching, what have you. Not taking a shot at the kid, just stating facts here. But with that being said, this is a game similar to Oregon where you are going to get everyone's best punch. And I have a hard time seeing Bear Alexander get stifled for an entire game. So if that USC defensive line is able to get some pressure on Penix up the middle, get him off his game, Washington has to punt a couple of times early. USC gets a touchdown early. Maybe gets a 10-point, 14-point lead. This goes sideways in a hurry.
Right.
Because even though, yes, you can play catch up with the offense, you're still down 14. You're still down 10. And that's right. That's where the problem comes in for me.
In that situation. So the one counter that I have there, because you're right, especially with the Marshawn Lloyd thing, but when it comes to Bear Alexander, I think that USC has been decent up front. I know the sack number is a little bit inflated because they got to play Colorado, and we've heard what Deion Sanders had to say about his offensive line. So I kind of throw that out when it comes to like pass rush stats for the most part. Like Oregon had 9 sacks against Colorado. Come on. So when it comes to just looking at that defensive line, I think it all starts and ends with Bear Alexander. And now that Julius Buelow is back, just kind of to counter this point. Now that Julius Buelow is back, and I don't think he's at 100% just yet, but I think he'll probably be closer to that this week. And having 2 or 3 guys in the interior that are big bodied, like I know Parker Brailsford isn't the biggest guy in the world, but man, he's as strong as anybody out there on that field. And he's played really well. I highlighted him in an article I had on Inside the Huskies the other day. Go check that out, plug. And it's something where I think that he might not be able to do a ton. And we know how good Washington's tackles are, right? So I think that especially if Washington is able to just kind of suppress the pass rush, one matchup that I'm really looking forward to watching, and we're going to talk about this more on the Thursday show as well, and probably on Friday as well, is I'm really interested to see if they can isolate USC's defensive backs in the run game. Because I had somebody like tweet at me the other day while I was talking about Dylan Johnson say, you need to stop talking about Dylan Johnson as much as you do. He's just a guy. I was like, I didn't have the heart to respond to him. But no, first of all. And second of all, USC's secondary, they're all super athletic dudes, but they're not necessarily the best tacklers. I look at Caden Bullock especially. I think Caden Bullock is a really talented player. And to me, he looks a lot like, as a draft nerd here, Ohio State safety, Malik Hooker, when he was coming out of the draft, where he's super rangy, super good in coverage, but not necessarily the best against the run. And I think if there's any way for Ryan Grubb to just try to make these safeties have to come up and tackle, that could be a major advantage for Washington and could negate some of the things that USC is going to try to do defensively. And I emphasize try when I talk about Alex Grinch. So,
I mean, speaking of trying though, that play calling for Washington has been a little trying at times. So if Ryan Grubb decides to get on his high horse one more time and live and die by the deep ball, I don't know. I mean, that's that. Here's the thing: give that USC defense a little bit of momentum, and it's going to go sideways. So I think that for Washington is if Ryan Grubb can get the play calling correct, because again, it's hard for us to take shots at 18 to 22-year-old kids, right? It's easier to take shots at the coaches making $2 million and more per year, right? So, and ultimately it does come down to play calling, right? Penix and those guys can do what they can, but at times this season the play calling has been a little bit hit and miss, a little bit forced, a little bit here and there. But it's still Grubb's still one of the best offensive coordinators in the country, if not the best, when everything is humming. And Alex Grinch is probably one of the worst defensive coordinators in college football. So the coaching, I'm being nice. I mean, I don't know. Maybe
I won't be. You can be. That's fine. I won't.
Well, statistically, I want to be accurate because maybe there is a worse defense out there than USC. But in terms of the caliber of players that USC has matched with the coaching, certainly is the worst, right? Like,
nobody does less with more.
Exactly. So and nobody does more with less than Kalen DeBoer, right? And his staff throughout the years, right? I mean, took Jake Hayner from nothing in Washington to make him an NFL quarterback. So
yeah, absolutely.
And Ryan Grubb was certainly a part of that. So I think, there's a lot of reasons why Washington can win, but there's a lot of reasons why USC can win. I do think though that USC is going to get some pressure. I think for whatever reason, when Scott Huff told me after the Arizona game that Arizona showed him some different pressures that they hadn't seen, that theme has repeated itself against Oregon, against Arizona State, even against Stanford, I would argue. And so I think USC with the bodies that they have is going to try. This is the one where I just said coaching is favoring Washington, so maybe USC doesn't watch the film. Maybe Washington kind of gets the benefit of it out there. So
I'm really glad you brought that up because I talked with Troy Fautano today and I actually asked him very specifically about how it is that the offensive line counters that. And he said, we've been running so many drills to try to counter these stunts recently. And so he told me a lot about the communication that the offensive line has to have, because I said, when one of these defensive ends does one of those hard couple of steps down and then drops back into coverage, and you see just kind of like a linebacker or a nickelback or whoever it is kind of looping around behind them on a stunt to just try to break it up the middle. How tough is that for you? And he said, that's incredibly tough because you have to identify it super quick. And then it's on me to yell he didn't give me the word, but he said, I have to yell a certain word to the rest of the offensive line to communicate that to Nate, to Parker, to Julius, to whoever else it is, to let them know that that's coming. And he said, we've been working on that a lot more over the last couple of weeks because sometimes it's really, really hard to identify. And I remember going back to watch the film because sometimes I feel like I talked about this on the show too, where they'll guys will just kind of come down in a single file line to just kind of make somebody pick you up. And then more often than not, somebody was coming free from the defense on one of those rushes.
Right. I mean, shout out to you for not being Connor Stallions and giving away the signs. But that being said,
hey, I honestly was not giving them either, but I will take shots at Connor Stallions. What appropriate.
I was good. I couldn't help myself on that one. But shout out to you for doing that. But I think Troy's not the problem. Roger's not the problem. It's the interior of the, and it's not even when I say interior, it's not Parker Rutherford either. It's the two guard spots that have really been where teams have just picked Washington apart. And whether or not Julius has been in there, I mean, Julius was a rock star for the first 3 or 4 games of the season before he got hurt. That left guard spot. That seems to be where everyone is just picking Washington apart for whatever reason. So can that communication get cleaned up? Because we talked about the play against Stanford where Washington gave up a 9-yard sack and Nate Calippo didn't block anybody and helped Parker Rutherford block somebody else. I'm wondering, is that the example where did Troy not communicate or did Nate not get the communication? Like, where's that communication breakdown? Because against Stanford, you can get away with it. You can't get away with that against USC, whether on offense or defense, right?
Or Utah or Oregon State. Yeah.
Right. But it's, again, keeping Caleb was 1-0 mindset intact here. Against USC, where, and especially, I mean, because again, if you lose to USC, yes, you still have your season to play, but now you have no margin for error. They've been given the margin of error the last couple of weeks,
right?
But the more that error comes down, the more it gets razor thin.
Right. No, I agree with you there. So before we continue, we are in our final segment today. We are going to be discussing the inaugural college football playoff rankings, and by the time you're listening to the show, they will definitely be out. So you can call us dumb in the comments all you want because like we can't read the future all the time. Sometimes, yeah, definitely. Like Lars' super accurate score prediction every week. But before we move on, we are going to take a second here because we're going to give a shout out to our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophies, also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for, and with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. So do you want to kick us off with your rankings predictions, or do you want me to go first?
I just wish we couldn't include Michigan in this, but we have to.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens with that.
We should have an asterisk just right here off the top, just saying, hey.
Oh, we can do that. I saw. This is a total side note. I saw a really great, just meme on Twitter the other day, where it was the Michigan logo and then the asterisk was a Houston Astros logo. And I thought that was the funniest thing.
I need that on a t-shirt and a flag like yesterday. Like I need that. I will, if somebody wants to make that flag and send it to me, I will hang it up right where these pennants are currently hanging. I will do that for the show and keep it up there until Michigan is sanctioned. I will do that if somebody is willing to make that for me. I just want to put that out there in the ether.
That would be absolutely incredible. And with that being said, I'm going to hand it off to you after that amazing segue.
Yeah. So, I mean, you want me to just rattle off what my top 4 are in the first 2?
Yeah, we'll go that way, and then we can just kind of go back and forth.
So, as much as I don't believe Georgia's the best team in the country, it's hard to say they're not until proven otherwise. Right. So Georgia's 1.
Yep.
In my opinion, Michigan is 2. However, I think Ohio State, if they have a legitimate chance to win that game this year, so I think Michigan, with that in that theory, would then
sign stolen anymore.
Right. Well, we'll find out in a couple of weeks whether or not who's got the signs or not. But with that being said, Michigan 2, Ohio State 3. because I think they're kind of that one of those two is going to knock each other out, and regardless, one of those is going to fall out when they lose.
Okay.
And the fourth team, after the last couple of weeks, not a big fan of it. Florida State. Not a fan of it. I'm not a fan of it, but I'm the Washington at 5, Oregon at 6, because Washington I would have at 5 without the Arizona State game.
You mean you have them at 4 without the Arizona State game?
Oh, right. I would have them at 4 with the Arizona State game. Yeah.
So I'm going to make a last second change here, just so there's a little bit of difference in our top 4, and I'm going to say, I'm calling it. I'm calling Omaha. So I'm still going to put Georgia at 1, but because Ohio State has a bigger win than Michigan does this year with the Penn State win, I'm going to put Ohio State at 2, Michigan at 3, and then Florida State at 4, Washington 5, Oregon 6.
Yeah.
So that kind of feels like the way it's going to go, where and somebody's going to have to lose in the top 4, because Michigan and Ohio State do play each other. So somebody's going to go down there, and then Washington and Oregon were, there's a good chance they meet again in the Pac-12 championship game. And of course, we'll see how the rest of the season plays out for both of them. But I think that's the best way to just kind of think about it right now. Who do you think, just kind of within the top 6, outside of just like, because we kind of have to talk about this from a little bit more of a national perspective.
Yeah.
Outside of Washington and Oregon, who do you think is the biggest mover in the top 4? And then who do you think is the biggest threat to both Washington and Oregon from behind them?
So I will answer that in the reverse. And I'm again, I'm not a fan of this, and I know a lot of people are not going to be a fan of this, but Texas is the biggest threat.
Okay.
Behind them. Now, yes, you could say Penn State, Alabama, Ole Miss, or Oklahoma, no way. Everybody else is too far out. I mean, really, it's Texas and Alabama, and those two teams already played each other, and they're 7 and 8 respectively in the AP poll. Right? Yeah, AP top 25. The one that I like, the biggest mover. I mean, Florida State. Sorry, Florida State. Sorry,
real FSU.
Sorry,
Fresno State.
Where, I mean, if you look at Fresno State's record, their best win is against LSU week 1. Right. LSU is,
and that looks pretty good now.
And it looks good now, but LSU does have 2 losses, so it's
But both their losses are to ranked teams, because their other one is Ole Miss.
Right, and Ole Miss is at 11, and I believe their
other loss is Florida State.
Right, so they're all right there. I think Washington, with another couple of top 25 wins at USC, at Oregon State, that would kind of cement their schedule. And Utah, call it what you will, it is what it is. Without Cam Rising, without Brent Kuithe, right, the tight end. That's
Brent Kuithe, yeah.
Brent Kuithe, sorry. Where Utah is not Utah this year. They are, but they're not, right? I mean, we saw it against Oregon. You mentioned it. They turned Swiss cheese into shredded cheese. Like it was horrendous. It was, but Kyle Whittingham always gets his guys up, right? And so Kyle Whittingham is a guy that you can't take lightly, even with that Oregon State result or the Oregon result. So there's plenty of ways in which Washington can strengthen their schedule, because otherwise, who is Washington aside from Oregon, which is a big win? What's Washington's next biggest win?
Right, and that it's Arizona.
Exactly, Arizona, or the most convincing would be Michigan State. But that
most convincing is Michigan State, but we're not.
But between Arizona and Michigan State, that's your 2 best games right there.
Right,
and so that's the problem for UW.
I agree. I think that one mover that we kind of need to consider, especially since they don't have Brock Bowers, is Georgia, because you're right. They haven't really looked like the number 1 team in the country, but we know what they can do, and you don't want to doubt them. But at the same point, the things could fall apart there quicker than you think. I still think they're a really talented team. I know we've got a couple of Georgia fans that listen to the show, but yeah, we do. So they're still a really talented team. They got a really good coaching staff, but things could fall apart there quicker than you think, especially without that top option. The SEC is always tough. But one thing that I do want to throw out here at the end, and I want to get your opinion on this too, because this is another. I don't know if this is considered a hot take, but a take that I want to throw out there if Washington is able to get through this gauntlet of November that we talked about on the Tuesday show, if they can do that and get through undefeated, I think that they have a legitimate argument to be the number one team in the country.
Does that include beating Oregon again in the Pac-12 championship game or no?
I'm saying going into that.
Going into that, yes, because I believe Michigan and Ohio State will have played at that point. And
they play each other the same week as Washington State.
And as to your point, you know what? The fact that, between Missouri and Ole Miss, one of those two is going to be a loss for Georgia. Eli Drinkwitz and Kirby Moore cooking down in Missouri. Kirby Moore also might be a candidate to watch in the future. I'm just going to put that name in the ether right now. Just future things, just keep that in mind. Kirby Moore, not Kellen, to be very specific. People don't misquote me and say, "Hey, he said on Moore." It's like, yeah, Kirby, curly loaded. So like, that sort of thing. But Kirby and Eli Drinkwitz have it cooking down in Missouri. So Georgia could certainly have a loss, and I think at that point, Washington would be the best team in the country in terms, especially because again, with running with the analogy of if you're able to beat Oregon State and you're able to beat USC both on the road, that I think alone would do it, because that's 2 top 25 wins right there. You can say what you want about USC's defense, but going into the Coliseum and then beating a really tough, just kind of stymie Oregon State team, that to me
can't forget Utah either.
Right. Well, but then you come back for Utah and things like that. But I think Utah is third in that pecking order. Just respectfully with the roster that they have. With Cam Rising, they're probably 2 or 1. Like,
sure. I just wanted to make sure they were included in that conversation since they're also a ranked team.
Right. But by the time they get to that game, they might not be ranked. So
it's coming up quicker than you think. Unless they lose this week.
But that's what I'm saying. Because again, after the Oregon game, they could lose this week and things go sideways. So I'm just saying, either way, there's at least 2 ranked teams, if not 3, that will strengthen Washington's schedule. And if they can come through undefeated, it's hard to not say they're not one of, if not the top 2 teams, and certainly the top 2 in the country. Like, it's also going to require Michael Penix to, have that late push for a Heisman. I think all the cards are in play for Washington to still attain what they want to, but they got to execute.
Right. And I think that's a great place to wrap this one up. Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. And to all the everydayers out there, thank you so much for just being a part of the show. We really do appreciate your support. It does mean a lot to us. We just passed 800 subscribers on YouTube. Please continue to share the show and everything. We're trying to get to that 1,000 mark here on YouTube, and we're hoping to do that before the end of the year. So it would really mean a lot to us if you're able to push that. And if this is your first time here, or you're not an everydayer yet, hey, we'd love for you to become one. There's so many easy ways to do that. Subscribe wherever you're watching or listening to the show, whether that's on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We are there. We are everywhere. Please leave us a 5-star review, like this video. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode, because we're here every day. So that's always part of this. And until then, we will talk to you on Thursday.